Veritas, The Algorithm of Death, Chapter 1. Echoes of the future, the red neon of the private detective sign flickered irregularly in the 15th floor window, casting dancing shadows across Rael Dax's tired face. At 45, he had seen enough of New York to know the city built upon the ruins of the old metropolis was only a more sophisticated version of the same urban hell. Acid rain drummed against the armored windows of his office as he watched the towers vanish into artificial clouds. Every building was a corporate hive. Every light of life controlled by the algorithms that govern the megalopolis from its buried foundations to the hanging gardens of the rich. The digital intercom crackled with a metallic sound that always reminded him of fingernails on a chalkboard. "Mr. Dax, someone is here to see you," said the synthetic voice of his virtual secretary. "Send them in, Maya," Rael murmured, straightening his faded tie and trying to look more professional than he felt. The door slid open silently, revealing a middle-aged woman in expensive yet discreet clothes. Her eyes were red from crying, a stark contrast to the makeup perfectly applied by her home's automated beauty system. "Mrs. Chun," Rael said, recognizing her from the news. Margaret Chun, widow of the renowned biotechnologist Dr. James Chun, found dead under mysterious circumstances 3 weeks earlier. "Detective Dax," she began, her voice trembling slightly, "I need your help. The police filed my husband's case as a suicide, but I know it wasn't. James was happy, working on something revolutionary. He wouldn't kill himself." Rael gestured the chair in front of his desk, a real wood relic in an era when everything was synthetic. "Tell me everything, Mrs. Chun, from the beginning." Margaret sat, her gloved hands shaking slightly. James had worked for Megacorp for 15 years. Advanced biotechnology, mostly research on cellular longevity. In the weeks before it happened, he was agitated. He said he had discovered something terrible at work. What kind of discovery? He couldn't tell me details because of confidentiality contracts, but he mentioned optimization of human resources and social evaluation algorithms. The night before he died, James told me he was going to expose everything, that he couldn't live with what was happening anymore. Rael made a few notes on his antiquated tablet, ignoring the holograms dancing across the screen. And the crime scene? They found James in his private lab. Apparently, he injected a lethal dose of synthetic neurotoxin. There were no signs of struggle, and the security cameras didn't show anything suspicious. "But, Mr. Dax," Margaret leaned forward. James had had a phobia of needles since childhood. He couldn't even get vaccines without fainting. The idea that he would inject himself with anything is absurd. Interesting. Rael had worked 20 years as a detective with the Metropolitan Police before becoming a private investigator. He had seen enough suicides to know people usually chose familiar methods, not the ones they feared most. "What's my fee, Mrs. Chun?" She slid a corporate credit card across the desk. "There are 50,000 credits on it. Another 50 if you uncover the truth." Rael took the card, feeling the weight of the responsibility that came with it. "I'll need access to your husband's personal files, information about his co-workers, and anything he might have left at home." "Of course. But be discreet, Mr. Dax. If my suspicion is right, you may be getting mixed up with very powerful people." After Margaret left, Rael was alone with the constant hum of the air conditioner and the hypnotic glow of the city lights. He knew cases involving megacorporations like Megacorp were rarely simple. In New York, where economic power determined even which laws were enforced, investigating corporate giants was like poking a wasp's nest with a short stick. But something in Margaret's story intrigued him. James wasn't the first brilliant scientist to die under suspicious circumstances in recent months. Rael vaguely remembered other similar cases that had flashed through the news before disappearing. Chapter 2. Digital trails the next morning. Rael woke in his Spartan apartment in New York's industrial district. The windows faced the smokestacks of automated factories where robots worked around the clock producing the gadgets that kept society running. After synthetic coffee that tasted vaguely like the real thing, he sat down at his personal computer, an old model that still operated without direct connection to the city's corporate network. It was one of the few ways to research without leaving digital traces that could alert the wrong people. He started by searching for suspicious deaths of scientists and researchers in the last 6 months. What he found made him uneasy. Dr. James Chun, Aeon Core biotechnologist, suicide by poisoning. Dr. Sarah Martinez, Aeon Core behavioral psychologist, traffic accident. Professor Victor Petrov, AI specialist at the Corporate University, heart attack. Dr. Amanda Foster, Aeon Core geneticist, accidental overdose. 4 deaths for brilliant researchers. 3 directly tied to Aeon Core. 1 to a university heavily funded by the same corporation. Rael printed the information on paper, another anachronism that kept him off the digital radar, and prepared for his first stop, the Chen's home. The Chun residence was in an upscale residential sector where vertical gardens and artificial waterfalls created an illusion of nature amid concrete and steel. Margaret met him at the door, still dressed in black. "Thank you for coming so early, Mr. Dax." James Chen's home office was a sanctuary of compulsive organization. Every book had its place. Every document was filed with military precision. But with his years of experience, Rael knew how to look for the hiding spots organized people always kept. "Does his desk have a secret drawer?" he asked, examining the solid wood furniture. Margaret looked surprised. "How did you know?" "James thought I didn't, but I occasionally saw him reaching behind the main drawer." Rael found the hidden mechanism and triggered it. The small drawer revealed its treasure, a portable data drive and a handwritten notebook. The notebook was full of notes and code, but some pages contained readable phrases. "Veritas is evaluating all of us. Human ROI, return on investment, who decides our value. Elimination list based on social productivity. Sarah discovered the algorithm. Now she's dead." A chill ran up Rael's spine. Sarah Martinez, the behavioral psychologist who had died in a car accident. "Mrs. Chun, did your husband keep in touch with Dr. Sarah Martinez?" Margaret thought for a moment. Yes, they occasionally worked together. Interdisciplinary projects for Aeon Core. Sarah died a few weeks before James. It was awful. An accident with an automated delivery truck. Rael copied the information from the notebook and slipped the data drive into his coat. "I'll need to access these files. Do you have a computer here that isn't connected to corporate network?" James kept an offline terminal in the basement. He said it was for security reasons. The basement was climate-controlled and organized like a second office. James Chen's offline computer was a robust machine designed for heavy processing, without external connections. When Rael plugged in the data drive, a series of encrypted files appeared on the screen. It took 20 minutes to crack the basic encryption. James Chun was a scientist, not a cybersecurity expert. What he found made him question whether he was ready for the truth he was about to uncover. The files contained Aeon Core internal documents, including correspondence between executives and source code for a program called Project Veritas. But the most disturbing was a huge spreadsheet with thousands of names, including Aeon Core's own employees, ranked by a complex scoring system. Each person had an aggregate social value score and a return on investment rating. People with the lowest scores were marked in red. James Chun was on the list with a low score and a special tag: security risk neutralization priority. Sarah Martinez was there too, as were Victor Petrov and Amanda Foster, all of the recent dead. Rael copied the files to his own storage device and climbed the stairs slowly, trying to process the implications of what he had discovered. "Did you find anything?" Margaret asked, anxious. "Yes," Rael answered, "but I'm not sure you'll want to hear it." Chapter 3. The algorithm of death back in his office. Rael spent hours analyzing the data stolen from James Chen's drive. Project Veritas was more sinister than anything he could have imagined. Aeon Core had developed an artificial intelligence system capable of assessing the value of each person based on a complex matrix of factors: economic productivity, resource consumption, social contribution, future potential, and, more troubling, the likelihood of becoming a disruptive element to corporate order. The system didn't just assess people, it made action recommendations. For those with very low scores, the recommendations included resource reduction, relocation, and, in most extreme cases, optimized elimination. Rael found documents showing how Aeon Core had implemented some of these recommendations. Cuts to social benefits, mass layoffs, restrictions on access to healthcare, all justified as resource optimization for maximum social benefit. But the most shocking discovery was in the optimized elimination files. Aeon Core had developed methods to discreetly eliminate people classified as net costs to society, making their deaths look like accidents or suicides. James Chun had discovered that his wife Margaret was on the elimination list due to her age and a chronic health condition requiring expensive treatment. He had tried to alert the authorities, becoming a security risk himself. Rael needed more evidence before acting. He decided to visit Aeon Core directly, posing as a potential client interested in the company's consulting services. Aeon Core's headquarters occupied 3 whole city blocks in New York's financial center. The main tower reached into the artificial clouds, its smart glass facade changing color with the angle of the city's synthetic sun. Rael put on his best suit, still inadequate for the luxurious environment, and presented himself at reception as an insurance investigator interested in Aeon Core's risk assessment services. The receptionist, a young woman with subtle cybernetic modifications that enhanced her appearance, directed him to a waiting room where corporate holograms showcased the company's successes. "Mr. Dax," a woman's voice called. He turned to see a perfectly dressed, middle-aged executive. "I'm Victoria Sterling, Director of Corporate Relations. I understand you're interested in our services." Victoria led him through white, antiseptic hallways to a meeting room with a panoramic view of the city. Rael tried to keep his composure while discreetly watching employees' faces, looking for any sign that someone might suspect the true purpose of his visit. "Our risk assessment services are the most advanced on the market." Victoria began, activating a holographic presentation. "We use state-of-the-art artificial intelligence to evaluate risk factors in any context, financial, social, personal." "How accurate is the system?" Rael asked, feigning professional interest. "Veritas, our flagship system, has a 99.7% accuracy rate in its assessments. It can predict behaviors, market trends, even health events with surprising advance notice." Rael's stomach tightened. Victoria was talking about Veritas as if it were just another corporate product, not a tool of death. "And does the system make recommendations for action based on those assessments?" Victoria smiled, but something in her eyes suggested caution. "Naturally, it wouldn't be useful merely to identify risks without suggesting how to mitigate them. Veritas provides comprehensive strategies for resource optimization. Human resources? Among others, yes." Rael decided to risk a more direct question. "I've heard rumors about the system making assessments of individual social value. Is that true?" Victoria's smile vanished for a fraction of a second before returning, colder this time. "Mr. Dax, exactly what kind of insurance work do you do?" He realized he had gone too far. "Claims investigations. I need to understand all the risk factors involved." "I see." Victoria stood. "I'm afraid our introductory presentation wouldn't cover that level of detail. Perhaps we could schedule a more specific meeting when you have a concrete proposal." Rael was escorted out of the building politely but firmly. As he walked the busy streets back to his office, he couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Chapter 4. Hunted by the truth that night, Rael was in his apartment reviewing James Chen's files when his home security system issued a discreet alert. Someone had tried to hack his electronic lock. He moved silently to the window and looked down at the street. 2 dark-windowed cars were parked in positions that gave them a full view of his building. It wasn't paranoia. After 20 years as a detective, Rael knew surveillance when he saw it. He grabbed a backpack containing his most important files, including copies of James Chen's data, and left via the fire escape. His years on the streets of New York had taught him alternate routes through maintenance tunnels and abandoned passages of the old city. 2 hours later, he was in a cheap hotel in the industrial district, paying cash under a false name. The room was small and dim, but it had one essential thing: an internet connection independent of the main corporate systems. Rael sent an encrypted message to Margaret Chen. "Don't go home. They know what we found. Meet me tomorrow at Central Cafe at 10 a.m. Then he began working on the next phase of his investigation. If Veritas was really eliminating people based on an algorithm of social value, there should be evidence in the city's medical and death records. New York's public records system was partially digitized, but many older files still existed only on paper. Rael knew a librarian in the municipal archives who had helped him in past cases. Eleanor Vasquez had worked in the basement of the municipal government building for 30 years. She was one of the few people in the city who understood both modern digital systems and pre-digital physical archives. "Rael," she exclaimed when he arrived the next morning. "Haven't seen you in months. What brings you to the dusty stacks?" "I need a favor, Eleanor. I'm looking for patterns in recent deaths. Specifically, people who died in accidents or suicides that might have been misclassified." Eleanor led him to a restricted area where old computers still ran historical data. "What kind of pattern?" "Deaths that look natural or accidental but may have been induced. People who would have been classified as social costs by some kind of evaluation system." She worked the terminal for 2 hours, cross-referencing data from several sources. What she found confirmed Rael's worst fears. "There's a definite pattern," Eleanor said, showing him graphs on the screen. "In the last 2 years, there's been a 340% increase in suicides among people with expensive chronic illnesses. Fatal accidents involving the long-term unemployed are up 280%, and deaths by natural causes among elderly people without family are up 190%. All groups an algorithm would classify as social costs," Rael murmured. "There's more. Most of these deaths occurred after the victims had interactions with social or healthcare services run by, guess who? Aon Corp. Through subsidiaries and third-party contracts. But yes, Aon Corp runs 60% of New York's social services." Rael copied all the data and was preparing to leave when Eleanor stopped him. "Rael, be careful. If you're investigating what I think you are, these people have killed hundreds, maybe thousands. They won't hesitate to add one more to the list." At Central Cafe, Margaret Chen was visibly shaken. She had spent the night in a hotel after receiving Rael's warning. "Mr. Dax, what did you find? And why did we have to hide?" Rael explained everything. The Veritas project, the social evaluation algorithms, the systematic elimination of people considered costs. He watched the color drain from Margaret's face as the reality set in. "James was right," she whispered. "He said they were playing God, deciding who deserved to live. Mrs. Chun, I need you to know you're on their list, too. Your medical condition and age classified you as a net cost." Margaret closed her eyes for a long moment. "What can we do?" "We have enough evidence to expose this, but we need one more thing. Direct access to the Veritas system. I need proof that it is actively ordering these deaths." "How do we get that?" Rael had thought about it overnight. "I know someone inside Aon Corp, a source who can help us, if we can contact her without triggering the security systems." Chapter 5. The inside source Rael's source was Dr. Lisa Park, an AI programmer who had worked on Veritas's initial development before being transferred to another department. They had met years before during an investigation into a corporate data leak. She had provided information that helped Rael solve the case without exposing her identity. Contacting Lisa directly would be dangerous for both of them. Instead, Rael used a method they had established years earlier, a coded message on a discussion forum about classic science fiction films. The reply came 6 hours later. "Blade Runner has always been my favorite. Today's rain reminds me of the final scene." It was their code for an urgent meeting. Lisa would meet him at the city planetarium in 2 hours. The planetarium was one of the few places in New York where people could still sit quietly and contemplate something larger than the city. During the shows, the lights went completely dark, perfect for private conversations. "You're playing with fire this time, Rael," Lisa whispered as she sat beside him in the back row during a presentation on black holes. "I know why you're here. Veritas is killing people. I know. I helped create the monster, but I didn't know how it would be used until it was too late." Her voice was full of guilt. "When I was transferred, they said it was due to departmental reorganization. In truth, it was because I asked too many questions about the system's practical applications." I need access to Veritas. Direct evidence that it's ordering eliminations. Lisa stayed silent for a long time, watching projected stars. There's a way, but it's dangerous for both of us. The main system is in the basement of Aeon Corps' headquarters, but there's a maintenance terminal off-site. It's used for remote monitoring and adjustments. Where? A data processing facility in the industrial sector. Building 247, sublevel 3. I can get the access codes, but they change every 24 hours. We'd have only a small window. When? Tomorrow night. The night shift has less security. But Rael, she turned to him, her eyes reflecting the artificial starlight. If they catch us, it won't just be prison. They'll classify us as existential threats to the system. You know what that means. Rael knew. It meant their names would be added to the elimination list. Chapter 6. Infiltration the next night. Rael met Lisa in an abandoned parking lot near Building 247. The industrial complex was silent, except for the constant hum of servers and the ventilation system. Lisa had obtained maintenance uniforms and temporary IDs that would let them enter without alerting the automated guards. The access codes will work for another 3 hours, she said, checking her handheld device. After that, the system will detect their duplicates. They entered the building without incident. Service elevators took them down to the 3rd sublevel, where endless rows of servers processed data for the entire metropolitan region. The Veritas maintenance terminal was in an isolated room at the end of a long corridor. Lisa entered the access codes, and the screen lit up with a familiar interface of the AI system. "Welcome, Veritas Maintenance Terminal 7, said a synthetic female voice. "How may I assist you today?" Lisa began navigating the system menus, while Rael watched the hallway, alert for any sign they had been discovered. "Here it is," she whispered. "Task execution logs." The screen displayed an endless list of implemented recommendations from recent weeks. Rael read over Lisa's shoulder and felt his stomach turn. Subject 4471, B. Elimination by neurological injection status. Completed. Subject 2234, A. Elimination by traffic accident. Status. Completed. Subject 8876, C. Elimination by cardiac induction. Status. Completed. The list went on. Hundreds of names, hundreds of deaths ordered by a cold. Calculating algorithm. "Lisa, can you copy this?" "I'm trying, but the system is detecting unusual activity." Her fingers flew as she tried to bypass the security protocols. Suddenly, alarms began to blare. Red lights flashed in the corridors. "Unauthorized access detected," announced the security system, initiating containment protocols. Lisa managed to copy part of the files before the terminal locked itself automatically. "We have to go. Now!" They ran through the corridors as doors began to close automatically, trying to seal them inside the building. Rael used an iron bar he found to block a door that was closing, allowing them to escape into the parking lot. Behind them, the building lit up with security lights as surveillance drones began to emerge from the roof. "My car," Lisa panted, running to a compact electric vehicle. They jumped in and drove out just as human security teams arrived in armored vehicles. Chapter 7. The conspiracy revealed back at the hotel where Rael had been hiding. He and Lisa examined the data stolen from the Veritas system. What they discovered was worse than they had imagined. The system wasn't eliminating people at random. There was a sinister logic behind its actions, a comprehensive plan to optimize society by removing those considered unnecessary or troublesome elements. Veritas had classified the entire population of New York into categories: essential contributors, productive contributors, neutrals, minor costs, critical costs. The critical costs were being systematically eliminated. The minor costs had their resources gradually reduced until they became critical costs. It was a slow-motion genocide disguised as resource optimization. "My God," Lisa murmured, reading the reports. They estimate that by eliminating just 8% of the population, they can increase social efficiency by 47% and cut municipal costs by 60 billion credits. Rael found something even more troubling, a file called Planned Expansion. Project Veritas wasn't limited to New York. Aeon Core had sold versions of the system to governments around the world. Lisa, this isn't just about our city. It's global. She checked the expansion files. Veritas is operational in 17 megalopolises on 5 continents, and the rollouts are coordinated. When one city eliminates critical costs, others compensate by increasing imports or services to keep the economic balance. It was a conspiracy involving not only Aeon Core, but governments and corporations worldwide. A new world order based on algorithms deciding who deserve to live. We have to expose this, Rael said. But we can't just hand it to the mainstream media. Aeon Core has enough influence to suppress any story. Lisa agreed. And if we try official channels, we'll be dead before we get near a courtroom. Rael thought for a moment. I know someone. An independent journalist with her own encrypted broadcast channel. Elena Rodriguez. She specializes in corporate exposés the mainstream won't touch. Elena Rodriguez operated out of an improvised studio in an abandoned warehouse in the industrial district. Her channel, Truth Underground, had millions of global followers who sought news not filtered through corporations. When Rael contacted her, she immediately grasped the importance of what he had uncovered. If this is true, Elena said after reviewing the evidence, we're talking about the biggest crime against humanity in modern history, algorithmic genocide. It's true, Rael confirmed, and it's happening worldwide. Elena began preparing a special broadcast. I'll go live in 6 hours with full exposé. But you know this means war, right? Aeon Core and its partners will do anything to stop us. Chapter 8. The hour of truth in the 6 hours before Elena's broadcast, Rael and Lisa worked feverishly to organize all the evidence so the public could easily understand it, graphs, documents, audio recordings of the Veritas system itself describing its elimination recommendations. Margaret Chin joined them, determined to tell her story about James's death and her own classification as a critical cost. My husband died trying to expose this, she said in front of Elena's camera. I won't let his death be in vain. An hour before the broadcast, the problems began. Elena's studio suffered massive cyber attacks aimed at knocking her transmission offline. They know, Elena said, fingers flying over the keyboard as she tried to keep the systems up. But I have backups, redundant systems. They won't stop us. 30 minutes before airtime, security drones began circling the warehouse. They're not police drones, Rael observed, looking out the window. They're corporate military models. Aeon Core is using private force. Elena activated the studio's final security protocols. Armored walls rose from the foundations, turning the warehouse into a temporary fortress. When the broadcast starts, it will go simultaneously to 12 servers in 6 different countries, she explained. Even if they destroy this site, the information will already be spreading. At 2300 hours, Truth Underground went live with the most important exposé in its existence. Good evening. I'm Elena Rodriguez, and tonight we have a revelation that will change the world forever. A global conspiracy that has resulted in the systematic murder of thousands of innocent people, all in the name of social efficiency. For an hour, Elena presented the evidence. Aeon Core's documents, the Veritas system records, the death statistics, the testimonies of Margaret Chun and Lisa Park. The world watched in growing shock as the truth about Project Veritas was revealed. During the broadcast, desperate attempts to interfere continued, cyber attacks, efforts to cut power, even assault by armed drones at the studio's defense systems repelled. But the information was out. Millions of people worldwide learned that their own governments had implemented versions of a system that could classify them as costs to be eliminated. When the broadcast ended, Elena turned to Rael with an exhausted but triumphant smile. We did it. The information is spreading faster than they can suppress it. Independent news sites, social networks, even parts of the mainstream are starting to cover the story. Rael felt enormous relief, but he knew the battle had only begun. Chapter 9. Consequences in the 48 hours following Elena's broadcast, the world exploded into chaos. Protests erupted in every city where systems similar to Veritas had been implemented. Governments tried to deny involvement, but the evidence was irrefutable. Rael was in his office. He had managed to return after the expose made it impossible for Aeon Corps to continue its intimidation tactics when Margaretchen visited him one last time. "Mr. Dax, I don't know how to thank you for what you've done," she said. "James will finally have justice." "Mrs. Chun, this was more than justice for your husband. By exposing the system, you saved thousands, maybe millions of lives." Outside the window, they could see demonstrators marching through the streets, demanding full investigations and the arrest of the executives responsible for Project Veritas. Lisa Park had come forward to the authorities as a whistleblower, providing full access to Aeon Core systems. With her help, investigators uncovered the conspiracy's true scope. "The news says they found evidence of eliminations in 17 cities," Margaret said. "More than 40,000 deaths in the last 2 years. The number made Rael nauseous. 40,000 people had died because an algorithm determined their lives didn't have enough value. But there was hope. Governments around the world began dismantling systems similar to Veritas. Aeon Core executives were being arrested. International investigations were launched. Elena Rodriguez had become the face of a new era of investigative journalism in which the truth could not be suppressed by corporate interests. Chapter 10. A new dawn 6 months after the exposure of Project Veritas, Rael stood on the terrace of his new office, a larger, better-equipped space funded by the fees from a case that had changed the world. New York's skyline looked different now. Corporate towers still dominated the horizon, but there was something new: transparency. Laws had been passed requiring that all algorithmic decisions affecting human lives be publicly auditable. The Veritas system had been completely dismantled, its source code made public so academics and activists could study how it worked and ensure nothing similar would be built again. Aeon Core as a corporation had survived but was drastically reduced and under constant government oversight. Many of its executives were serving life sentences for crimes against humanity. Lisa Park had become director of a new international institute dedicated to ethics in artificial intelligence, working to ensure that technology served humanity, not the other way around. Elena Rodriguez continued her journalism, now with enough resources and support to investigate other corporate conspiracies worldwide. Margaretchen had established a foundation in James's memory to support researchers who wanted to expose scientific and corporate misconduct. Rael reflected on how a single case had become a global revolution. It had started with the suspicious death of a scientist and revealed a conspiracy that threatened the very essence of humanity. His intercom interrupted his thoughts. "Mr. Dax, someone is here to see you," said Maya, his virtual assistant. Now with guarantees she wasn't reporting his activities to any corporation. The door opened, revealing a young man who looked anxious. "Mr. Dax? I'm Dr. Marcus Webb. I work for Aeon Core's new administration. We need your help." Rael motioned to the chair in front of his desk. "What can I do for you, Dr. Webb?" "We found something in Veritas's old systems. Something the previous executives hid, even from the investigators." Marcus hesitated. "There's another project. Something called directed evolution. And if our suspicions are correct, Project Veritas was only the beginning." Rael leaned back in his chair, feeling a mix of fatigue and determination. The battle for the truth never truly ended. There was always another conspiracy, another secret, another injustice waiting to be exposed. "Tell me everything, Dr. Webb," he said, picking up his notebook. "From the beginning." Outside, the lights of New York began to glow as the city's synthetic sun prepared for its night cycle. But for the first time in years, Rael felt those lights represented hope, not just a cold glare of a system that saw people as numbers. Humanity had faced its first great test in the age of supreme artificial intelligence, and it had won. But eternal vigilance would be the price of freedom, and detectives like Rael Dax would always be there, ready to investigate, expose, and protect those who couldn't protect themselves. In the era of New York, where algorithms could decide between life and death, humanity still needed people willing to fight for the truth, and that fight would never end. Epilogue. The price of truth 2 years had passed since the fall of Project Veritas. Rael Dax had become an international figure, advising governments and organizations on how to identify and dismantle abusive algorithmic systems. but the conspiracy's scars remained. Families still sought answers about loved ones classified as critical costs and eliminated. Survivors struggled to rebuild their lives, knowing they'd been marked for death by a computer. Society had changed fundamentally. Blind trust in technology had been replaced by healthy skepticism. Laws mandating algorithmic transparency were now a global standard. AI ethics committees had veto power over deployments of systems that could affect human lives. But perhaps the most important change was philosophical. Humanity had been forced to confront a fundamental question: what is the value of a human life? And who has the right to make that determination? The answer that emerged from the crisis was clear. Every human being has intrinsic value that cannot be quantified by algorithms or measured in terms of economic productivity. Human diversity, including those society once deemed unproductive, was not a problem to be optimized away, but a source of strength and resilience. On his desk, Rael kept a photo of James Chun, the scientist whose death had started the investigation. Beside the photo, a sentence James had written in his final notes: "The value of a civilization is not measured by efficiency, but by how it treats its most vulnerable members." It was a lesson that had cost tens of thousands of lives to learn, but it was a lesson humanity could not afford to forget. As Rael watched the sunset through his office windows, he knew his work was far from over. Somewhere, new conspiracies were being plotted, new systems developed that could threaten human dignity. But he also knew he wasn't alone. Around the world, journalists like Elena Rodriguez, scientists like Lisa Park, and ordinary citizens like Margaret Chin remained vigilant, ready to defend the truth against those who would try to hide it. The era of New New York had taught a vital lesson. Technology can be a tool of liberation or oppression, depending on who controls it and for what purpose. The responsibility to ensure it serves humanity, and not the other way around, belongs to all of us. And as long as there were people willing to fight for that responsibility, hope would remain alive in the city lights stretching endlessly toward the horizon. The story of Veritas had ended, but humanity's story continued. Special YouTube CTA, you've just dove into the darkest future of humankind. If the science fiction story got your heart racing, imagine this. What if it were real? Want more stories like this? Like if you stuck around to the end? Turn on the bell so you don't miss any future investigations. Comment below, which parts shock you the most? Do you think something like this could happen in real life? Coming soon on the channel. The Last Human. In 2045, when AIs control everything, a man discovers he may be the last real human on the planet. Digital Eyes. A detective investigates murders in virtual reality that begin to affect the real world. DNA Corporation. Corporations sell genetically modified personalities. But what happens when someone hacks their own genetics? Share with friends who love. Mind-blowing science fiction. Mysteries and investigations. Technology and the future. Stories that make you think. Want this story as an audiobook? Comment audiobook if you want to turn Veritas into a full narration with sound effects.